even a little Pete Townsend flourish at the end there. I love it.
Well, I was just sure I could do that.
Yeah, but you got the leg kick. You got the leg kick. That's my talk. Thank you very much. If all of you took a deep breath a few times with him, then we're good, right? Yeah. You don't know this, but what do I always tell you during the middle of the talks? Breathe, take a breath, all that stuff. You're channeling me. I lived in LA for 5 years, by the way. Oh yeah. I wasn't sure if I was going to get his last name right, because I have a friend named Weinman, and I meant to make sure I got Weinberg right. And so I told Gary a joke right beforehand. I'll share it with you. This is it's an ethnic joke, but I've been able to tell it to both ethnicities, and they both laugh. So it's one of those, okay? There's a bar, and at one end of the bar there's a Vietnamese guy sitting, and at the other end of the bar there's a Jewish guy sitting there, and they're not together. They're just having their drinks. And all of a sudden the Jewish guy gets up off of his bar stool, walks down to the Vietnamese guy, hits him hard as he can, knocks him on the floor. The Vietnamese guy's laying on the floor, and he looks up and he goes, "What was that for?" He goes, "That was for Pearl Harbor." And the Vietnamese guy looks up at him and he says, "Pearl Harbor? Pearl Harbor was the Japanese. I'm Vietnamese." The guy looks at him and he says, "Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, they're all the same to me," and walks back down and sits on his bar stool. So the Vietnamese guy gets up, pulls himself back up onto the bar stool, and orders another drink, and you can see the wheels turning. All of a sudden he jumps off the bar stool, walks down to the Jewish guy, hits him hard as he can, knocks him on the floor, and he says, "What was that for?" And he goes, "That was for sinking the Titanic." He goes, "The Titanic?" He says, "The Titanic was sunk by an iceberg." And he goes, "Iceberg, Goldberg, Weinberg, they're all the same to me." Swami Bhyanananda, who's a professional comedian, is coming. Give him up. So, fearlessness, being fearless. How many want to be fearless? No, you don't. No, you don't. Huh? You want to have a little fear. If you're standing in the middle of the freeway and a big object is coming down at you, it's wise to have a little fear, and notice that, right? To realize that there's going to be some consequences, and you might want to take some action to avoid those consequences, right? If you're driving down the 101 and you notice somebody who's wobbling across a couple of lanes, it's good to have a little fear and pay attention, because that's really what healthy fear does for us. It says, wake up, pay attention. You're entering into a challenging territory. Be extra alert. How many alerts are there in the room? I've never found alert before, but sorry. Bad day. It's a bad day. You want to be, but there's a healthy fear. And healthy fear, when we look at it, it has a reason, a very tangible reason that we can see why I'm feeling fear. Okay? A friend of mine just recently said, spirituality is not a spectator sport, or should not be a spectator sport. Right? You guys should not be spectators. We should all be participating in spirituality. Football is a good sport to be a spectator in, because it's better than to be down there on the field with those guys. That would be, if I was down there on the field with those guys, I would be living in fear. And it would be a healthy fear, and I would get myself off that field as fast as possible, especially if I had no pads. But realistic fear has reasons. It has something we can look at. We can say, this is why I'm afraid of it, and this is what I can do about it. I can do something tangible about it. So that's a healthy fear. That's a healthy fear. My friend Dr. Ken Gordon, I was just up in Eugene for the last few days, and the Eugene Church was celebrating their 45th anniversary on Friday of being a Center for Spiritual Living for 45 years. Isn't that cool? So I was up there helping them to party. If there's a party, I'm there to help. And so Dr. Ken Gordon, who's the community spiritual leader of all the Centers for Spiritual Living, was the keynote speaker there. And he talked about a time when he was young, that about 4 or 5 years old, that he saw this wonderful, bright, glowing thing in his parents' house, and he put his hand on it. And then took it off immediately because it was the stove and a hot burner, right? Somebody on the way out was talking about, they say you need 21 days to change a habit. And he says, and we were talking about, no, you don't, because you can either do repetition or you can do emotional involvement to change a habit. You don't need to put your hand on the burner for 21 days in a row to get the idea that you don't put your hand on the burner, right? Emotional involvement is the other way to do it. So he put his hand on there, he had that experience, and felt that fear. And we have a candle way out of line here, and I tried this last time and burnt the heck out of myself, so it's good. I learned. So he learned not to put his hand on the stove anymore. When he was 12 years old, he had a job washing dishes in a restaurant. And in order to put the dishes away, he had to stack the dishes across the grill on a place where they stack the plates so they could pull them off and put them down there. And he said he was living in fear of course, putting his hands on or something onto the grill and getting burned again. But he had to master that fear. He had to master that fear. And so he had a reason to be afraid, and he had a way to be alert while he was doing this dangerous activity, to pay attention, to be extra careful that he did not slip, fall, put his hands down, or anything like that. So that's a fear that's a rational fear, right? The answer is right. Okay. We can have it when we're facing an unfamiliar situation. We're going to do something, and we may want to get some research about it. We may want to say, I want to know more about this. I'm beginning to date a person. I might want to do a background check on this person if they seem shady, you know? Especially if I've had a history of attracting people who need background checks on them previously, you know? I might want to check this person, you know? I heard a woman once describe herself, you could put me in a room with 99 clean, sober, wonderful men and one alcoholic, and I would gravitate to the alcoholic no matter, every single time. And so you might want to pay attention and notice that if you're that kind of person and you're moving into a situation where you're living in fear. Okay? So that's something we can do something about. That's a healthy fear. There's a reason for it. There's something we can do about it, and it's immediate. It's happening right there. Unrealistic fear is where it's irrational, it's constant, and oftentimes it's underlying fear. It's our way of approaching the world is living in this sort of low fear, or sometimes this high fear. And it's like riding down the freeway, the 101, with your parking brake on and wondering why your car is kind of going slow and jerking. Okay? How many of you, none of you do this, I know, but you've seen people who live their lives that way, right? You have a friend or a relative or a co-worker that you've seen living their lives that way. And so they're living in this unrealistic fear. So to go back, a realistic fear, we can deal with it. We can understand the source of the fear. We can create a plan to work around it. And we can also do something else. We can focus on the outcome we desire instead of that. See, Dr. Ken wanted a desire of having that job washing dishes, so he focused on the desire of making sure the plates got in the right place without him touching the grill. We can focus on the outcome we want. When I was in my 20s, I worked for my cousin up in Portland, Oregon, he had an advertising photography studio, a successful one. And we had one of our clients was Kenworth Trucks. And we had this assignment to go photograph for their calendar. And so one of the things we were doing was we were following a Kenworth truck around the freeways of Portland and across the bridges, the two freeway bridges in Portland, by helicopter. 3 of us crammed into a little 2-person helicopter. Now I should tell you that number one, I don't know how to swim. I did mention that we were over the Willamette River, right? And number two, which is not like it's not even like the Sacramento River, it's a big river. And number two, I'm afraid of heights. And so I got in this helicopter. Here I am strapped in the middle between the two of them. I can't move, which is also claustrophobia, which is another one of I'm not super claustrophobic, but I don't like tight spaces. And immediately we lift off right over the water, and up we go in this helicopter, right? And all of a sudden, all my fears are facing, boom! It's like, holy, you know what? I said that out loud. And so, but I had a moment where I finally said, you know what? Either I'm going to die or I'm not. I need to load film. I just started doing the process I needed to do to load film. I just started to be there with it and get with it. And after a while, I lost the fear. The pilot hadn't crashed us. He came close a couple times, but that was because he was hovering right at the edge of the bridge so we could get a really good shot. And the wind is coming down the Willamette River, and we're sitting in this helicopter and it's going jerk, jerk, jerk. He's trying to hold it still, it's going jerk, jerk. But we're doing that, and I finally realized, what, this guy's pretty good. The payoff for that was a few weeks later, we did another Kenworth truck, but it was on the Oregon coast. And we're in the same helicopter, same pilot, flying up the Oregon coast, photographing this Kenworth log truck doing it. And I got to see the beauty of the Oregon coast from off, looking back onto it, which is not something I had ever done before. And it was a gorgeous scene, and I didn't have to be afraid. I could just enjoy the beauty of the moment and load film to get my cousin happy. And so I was more afraid of him at that point in time than I was of the circumstances. We can do something to change our focus with the fear. We can focus on the result we want. If I'm feeling fear, I'm not actually doing what it is that I'm afraid of. Fear is anticipatory. Fear is what I feel beforehand. If I'm down in the field playing football with those guys, I'm down in the field playing football with those guys. I'm not feeling the fear of, I'm afraid to get down the field to play football. When Gary's up here singing, he doesn't have any fear of singing in public because he's doing it. Maybe beforehand he has butterflies in his stomach and says, am I going to sing the right song? Am I going to sing in key? Am I going to hit the wrong notes? Is my guitar string going to break? All that stuff goes through the mind. But when he's up here doing it, he's just singing, right? So fear is anticipatory, and that's the other thing to realize about fear. If I'm living in fear, if I'm feeling fear, one of the best things I can do is to get in motion, to get into an action that takes me in the direction of where I don't want to go. Or sometimes takes me in the direction of where I do want to go, which is away from what I'm afraid of, if it's a hungry lion coming down the road. Unrealistic fear. God, you guys are, that was a joke. The hungry lion? Come on. There we go. Laugh track. Michael, we need a laugh track for future services. Unrealistic fears, we oftentimes have no immediate threat. There isn't anything we can say, I'm really, that's a threat to me. It's just this kind of low level, I'm just living afraid. It's kind of an underlying way of dealing with life. Probably most of us have experienced that at some point in time in our life or in some area of our life. Or again, we know somebody. Okay? It arises from our insecurities. And as the reading said, it's because we have faith in something other than God or good. And we don't have faith in ourselves to manifest our God nature or our good. Okay? So we don't believe in that infinite universal oneness that we talk about. And we don't have faith in that infinite universal oneness manifested as each of us that we talk about. And so when we get into that, and we all do, it's okay. The question isn't do I go there? The question is, do I get stuck there? Okay? And so it's good to remind ourselves, wait a minute, there's God plus one equals a majority, and I'm that one. Let's move forward. So we have faith in negative outcomes. We have faith in painful outcomes. And that's what occupies our consciousness and keeps us from moving forward. Because we're not going to move forward towards painful outcomes, are we? Okay, 2 of you aren't. Good. The rest of you, we have a course in masochism afterwards. And we're not going to move forward towards painful outcomes, right? Thank you. And so how do we start to deal with this irrational fear? Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us that God acts through confidence in good. God acts through a confidence in good. If I am confident that I can have my good, I open up to the movement of Spirit through me. In the story of the Israelites leaving Egypt, they hit the Promised Land about 6 weeks into their journey, right? But they didn't have any confidence that they could move into the Promised Land. They had a couple of guys, Joshua and another guy, who went in and said, "Hey, man, the grapes are fabulous, and it's beautiful, and we can do this thing." And the other 38 recruits spies came back and said, "There's giants, and there's armies, and there's all this stuff," and they didn't have it. And Moses kept saying, "It's like, look, God's with us. We can do this thing." And they said, "No." They didn't have faith. Which is kind of silly, because they just watched the Red Sea be parted not that long before that. And But anyway, it's a good story. That's why I say that, I talked about this a few weeks ago, and as I said, no Egyptians and no Canaanites were harmed in the making of this story, because they weren't around, actually. It's just a metaphorical story. But It's our story. It's our story of consciousness. We have this process, and sometimes no matter how many miracles we've just witnessed, when we come up to the time for the next one, we get scared. We don't think it's going to happen the next time. I mean, the sun rose up in the east, for the last 6 billion years, but is it going to today? I'm not sure. And so we live sometimes in that captivity. So our confidence in good, when we start to have our confidence in good, when we open up and allow Spirit to move through us, when we start to say, you know what, I'm bigger than this fear. I'm bigger than this fear. God as me. Not me, the human self. Me, the human self, might be scary. But me, as God, I am afraid, I am bigger than that fear. So 4 steps to do to work with this. Number 1 is identify what is the real fear or the belief that's working on us. And it's oftentimes not what we think it is. Okay? If I'm, for instance, afraid to move forward into a relationship, or afraid of relationships, I have some beliefs running. First of all, I have a fear of getting hurt. Secondly, I have a belief that the source of my love is outside of me. Third, I might have a belief that I'm not lovable, or that I don't know how to pick relationship partners, or something along those lines. Now, I don't know too many people like that, but a few of you might have witnessed a minister probably about up to 6-7 months ago who was up here on the platform who kept saying that, I'm happy living by myself, don't need another relationship, stinking relationship, thank you very much, until he met a person named Cynthia. But anyways, because I came out of my last divorce kind of hurt and wounded, and I didn't want to have that experience all over again and get my heart broken once again. And so I was good. I was done. I'm happy. I had some of the, one of the most intelligent people that I know of to have conversations with around my house. Thank you. He's a nice person too, easy to get along with, wants the same things I do. Loves chocolate. And I don't have to share the chocolate with him. He doesn't care about the toilet seat, whether it's up or down. So we have this fear, and we cover ourselves over by saying other things. But the belief is, I don't want to get hurt. I don't trust myself to pick another healthy relationship partner. I've obviously had a long history of picking unhealthy relationships. I've obviously had a long history of relationships not working out. I've had a long history of maybe jobs not working out. This applies everywhere. I have this pattern running, and I don't believe I can get over it. Okay? And so the thing is, what we forget in that case is that evolution is ever forward, as Ernest Holmes reminds us. That when we come out of one relationship, something like that, we do our work, we start to grow as a person, and so the person moving into the next relationship, the person moving into the next job, the person moving into the next physical experience, that is not the same person that you were the last time. You're not making the same choices because you are not the same person. And so we start to grow, we start to have confidence in our good. And that's the second part of this next, is that we start to remember the law of attention. And the law of attention says, what I put my attention on increases. Now, if I'm going to put my attention on what I'm afraid of, what's going to increase in my field of vision in my life? My fear, and things to be afraid of. You ever notice those people that, they start they start watching the news, and there's this happening, and pretty soon there's this more happening, and then there's this happening, and all of a sudden the whole world is on fire, as you were saying, and everything is looking dire. Now, the thing is that there's a lot of people doing some really wonderful things in this world. Have you noticed? Yeah. Some of them are sitting right in this room. Okay? There's a lot of love happening. The news doesn't like to report on that because, dang, it's boring, according to them. It doesn't sell. It's not sexy. But there's a lot happening that's not on the news. But what we put our attention on, if we want to, is the fear. What we put our attention on is what doesn't work out. And so that leads us to the third step. Change your attention. The motto of this teaching is what? Change your thinking, change your life. Change your thinking, change your life. Notice that there's 2 words in common in both those. Change and your. That's not your neighbors. That's not the person across the street. That's not the leaders of our country. Change. I have to change my thinking and I will change my life. Breathe. Get that, take a breath. So we start to change our attention from failure towards the success that we want. We start imagining living the life we want. Gary used a wonderful word in his song. The word was desire. See, fear can have a big emotional charge to it, right? You notice? Okay. Desire has a big emotional charge to it. If I can build a greater desire, and I know in some circles that's a dirty word. Oh, I shouldn't desire anything. I should get rid of all my desires and just be purely spiritual. No, you shouldn't. I used to be a Zen Buddhist for a long time. And that was one of the things that it was this process of get rid of all your desires and you'll be happy. And eventually you come to the Zen master and he goes, and you go, well, I got rid of all my desires. And the Zen master says, why did you do that? Oh, I desire enlightenment. We got to get rid of that. That's a desire. Get rid of that desire. And you go back and you try and get rid of the desire for enlightenment. And pretty soon you realize that we as human beings are desiring mechanisms. Desire is the process in the universe. It flows through us. Now we may have desires we judge ourselves or judge as not the best desires or the healthiest desires. If I go for a whole lot of chocolate, Kiana, right?
I love chocolate.
Yeah, but if I go for too much chocolate, she's not the best person to talk to about this. This is my alter ego that sits there and goes, yeah, more. We stopped at this wonderful pastry shop in Eugene on the way home yesterday, or as we were leaving yesterday, and it was like, I'll take one of those, and 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 one of those, please. I didn't actually do that, but that's what my Kiana self said. But we start to change and we start to listen to what is it that I truly, my heart, my soul desires in my life. Do I desire love? Do I desire health? Do I desire financial health? Do I desire freedom to move and create in this world the way that I want to? I love Mary Manamors's description of wealth is enough money to be comfortable enough to create what we want. And for various people, that varies all over the place, doesn't it? But enough money to be comfortable enough to create the life I want. So we change our fear into desire. We change the focus of what we're looking at into what do I really want, instead of what am I really afraid of. See, when the person walked into my office and said I'd be interested in a relationship with you, that's not quite how she said it, but that was the effect of it. Fortunately, about a week before that, I had finally had a come to Jesus meeting with Spirit. And I realized, actually, Spirit had a come to Jesus meeting with me. Okay? And said, you know what? It is time for you to open up to love. It's time for you to open up your heart again. And I said, okay, I'm willing. And a week later, this woman walked into my office. And she's now, my girlfriend and probably pretty close to something more than that. And so we focus on what is the desire we want. What do we desire? We build that up. We build that feeling. We build that passion. We build that light up. We make that bigger, bolder, and brighter than the fear in our minds. And when we do that, the last thing we do then is to apply love. If you remember last week, if you were here for Reverend Mary's talk last week and talking about Phineas Quimby, he said there are two kinds of thoughts. Fear thoughts will make us unhealthy and make us sick eventually. And if we turn to love, it will make us healthy and more healthy. If we can shine love into every single aspect of our lives, if we can start to look at our lives and say, you know what? I may not even know how, I may not even know why, but I'm going to shine love into this. Because love is the nature of God. It's what invokes us into being in unity with that infinite presence that is the one. And it's the greatest power we know. It is greater than fear. Love is greater than fear. Okay? And so we start to say, I am willing to shine love in this. One of my favorite ways to do this is a little posture prayer that I learned from Dr. Marcia Sutton and Reverend Lloyd Strom. And it simply goes like this: I praise whatever the situation is. I raise whatever the situation is in the name of love. So when I was having difficulty getting over my feelings about my ex-wife, I would simply go, I praise my ex-wife. I would use her name, but I'm not going to hear her because we're recording. I praised my ex-wife, I raised my ex-wife in the name of love. Repeatedly for a while. And it shifted my energy. If you're having difficulty with your relationship partner, go off in your room for a little while and just simply go, I praise so-and-so, I raise that so-and-so, and in the name of love, you know? And just practice that. Practice your body. If you're having a health challenge, I raise my left knee. I raise my left knee in the name of health, the God quality you want to bring in, and bring it into your body. If your finances are a challenge, I praise my finances. I raise my finances in the name of wealth, or in the name of freedom, or in the name of whatever God quality you want. So it's a wonderful way to start to apply love to get it into the body. Let's do that once together. Everybody pick something that you want to have, you know, that either you're feeling challenged by or you want to experience more love in your life or something like that. Make sure you're not going to clobber your neighbor a little bit with your things. Okay? But just simply go, I praise, such and such. I raise this congregation in the name of love. Let's do it again. I praise this congregation. I raise this congregation in the name of love. Okay? Take that home and practice that this week. And then have a gratitude practice. It's really hard to be in fear when you're living in gratitude. You notice? Okay. Have a gratitude practice. That's a part of expressing that love. Ken Gordon talked about that when he wakes up in the morning, he asks, what frightens me today? What is still frightening me today? Isn't that a great practice? Do you realize that, and then he starts to work on it, starts to deal with it. Do you realize that if we did that, we would be taking layers and layers and layers on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, off of whatever it is that scares us? And so I invite you this week for your homework to begin when you wake up in the morning to ask yourself, what still frightens me? And at first, it may be a big, long list, okay? Take one. Take one. And start to work on it. And these are the 4 ways I'll invite you to work on it. Number 1, address it. Name it. Name it for what it is. Okay? I'm afraid of whatever it is. I'm just noticing that I'm afraid of it. Don't beat yourself up for it. Don't feel guilty. Just notice, I'm feeling afraid of. I'm feeling afraid of moving deeper into the love of my relationship. You know, one of the ways that we let fear run our lives is we kind of keep the status quo. Everything's just the same. Let's not shift too much. Because if I start to move, something might change. That person might see more of me, and then they might not like me. I mean, they've been with me for 20 years. But if I go a little bit deeper and become a little more authentic of who I am, this time they might leave and never come back. Or something like that. So if you notice that you're stuck in one of those situations where you're keeping your life just the same, that's one of the places where you're stuck in fear. So ask yourself, number 1, name it. What am I afraid of? Number 2, is it current? Is it a real fear? Is it something that I have to address today? You know, if I've fallen down and twisted my knee, you know, the thing that it might be a real fear that I've twisted my knee and hurt myself, and what I need to do about it is go see a doctor. You know, or something like that, okay? What do I need to know? What do I need to do? What questions do I need answered? If it's an old fear, we start to ask a couple questions. 1, what's the payoff for carrying this fear around? If you're stuck in an old fear, there's a payoff. It's comfortable, I feel safe, I know what it's like. You know, it's not much of a life, but I know how to work it. You know? I don't have much money, but I know how to work not having much money. I don't want to do anything to give me more money because I might not know how to work having more money. I might not know how to work having more love in my life. So I'll just stay right here. This is comfortable. Okay? And then the other thing is how have I used this fear to avoid facing the real challenge? Because oftentimes it's just we're scared of facing what's the real challenge. And so we stay locked in that fear because we don't have to move forward. Take a breath. If you're willing to move forward, then we move into step 3, change my attention. Change your attention. What is it that you really want in your life? What is it that you want to build desire for? What is it that you want to start to move that energy of spirit and the confidence in your good, and how big is that good? That big and bigger. Yeah. See, those are people who are saying, I want some good, right there. And blessedly, they have somebody who's delivering the good to them. So let's just bless that young one. And know that he or she gets that good. Might be a dry diaper, it might be a bottle, it might be just, I want some love. Feel the fear and do it anyway. That's why I say we will never be fearless. We'll never have not fear. The question is, will I do it anyways? Will I make my desire, will I make what it is that's my outcome more important than the fear? Will I make that loving relationship, that even more loving relationship, that wealthier, better paying and better expressing who I am work? Will I make that healthier body, will I make whatever it is more important than the fear? So feel the fear, do it anyways. Remember that God is your source and God plus one is a majority. And then finally, apply love. How can I apply love to the situation? Apply love. So that's your 4 steps for homework this week. You willing to go there?
Yes.
Okay. Address whatever your fear is, name it. Find out if it's old or current. Change your attention and apply love. I want to close with a quote from Ernest, which is the second half of this reading that we did today. But what is fear? Fear is nothing more nor less than the negative use of faith. We talked a few weeks ago about faith and aiming it in the wrong direction or the right direction. It's just faith misplaced, he says. A belief in 2 powers instead of one. A belief that there can be a power opposed to God whose influence and ability may bring us evil. In other words, to correct all the evils of the world would be but to have the positive faith rightly placed, a faith that lays hold of the integrity of the universe and the beneficence of God and the unity of all life. That was a scary word there, but I got through it. I faced that fear. We lay hold of the integrity of the universe and the beneficence of God, that God that is greater than us. So I invite you this week to do that. I invite you this week to tap into that which is the life that is truly fearless and to live from that. Let's pray. And there is one life. And because there is only one life, that life has nothing to be afraid of within itself. That life is love, that life is joy, that life is good. That life is fearless because there's nothing to fear in that one life. And I recognize that because that life is all that there is, because it is the infinite unity of this universe, that we ourselves, in every circumstance of our lives, are one of this one life. And therefore, we, in truth, have nothing to fear. There may be things to be aware of on this human level as we play in time and space, but there is nothing to fear with that deep fear that paralyzes us, that cripples us. And so I speak my word that we open to that love, that nature of love that is greater than the fear, that nature of love that is freeing, that is expanding, that is opening, that is the warming, that is the light of this universe and the light of each of us. We open to that love, we open to that light, we open to that true nature of who we are. We allow it to express through us. We turn on the spigot and we say yes. Yes to my good. Yes to that love, yes to that power, yes to the dreams that I truly do want in my life. Yes to the desires of my heart that maybe I put away out of fear and thought could never happen because I didn't have something like this teaching or this awareness. And now I am ready to say yes. And so we open up to that. We open up to that. And out of that comes the most magnificent flow of the divine, the flow of spirit in our lives that makes things so much better than even we could imagine. The love, the freedom, the joy, the creativity, so much greater than we can even imagine, because that is the nature of spirit. And so for this, for each person who says yes today, I'm so grateful. For the good and the love that starts to flow through us, and the fear that dissipates back into the nothingness from which it came, I'm so grateful. For the spirit that is moving in through and as it all, I am ever, ever, ever so grateful. And so we allow ourselves to be moved by this. We allow ourselves to release this word, to be part of this word, to let it be planted in our soul, to let it be planted in our being, and to let it be planted in the law of creativity of the universe so that it manifests as who we are fully, right here, right now, we say, yes, it is done. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.
To love, serve.